Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to explain the objectivist conception of life as the standard of value, and basically from there explain why we view selfishness as a virtue. So to begin with, this is kind of how Rand starts her ethical system. She begins by questioning, why do we need ethics at all? Why do we need to act? And to basically explain this, we need to look at the fundamental alternative that every living organism faces, the question of life or death. Stagnation leads to death. Stagnation leads one to die. So one needs to act primarily to live. That is the primary purpose of action. That is why you need to act in general, because of this is the fundamental alternative that you face as a living organism, life or death. Life requires action. You need to act in order to live, and if you don't act, you're going to die. So fundamentally, the primary purpose of action is living. This essentially means basically that the purpose of action is life. The purpose of action is ultimately life. And now values are basically things that we act to gain or keep. And since life is the primary purpose of action, life is the primary value. Life is the standard by which all other values are judged. Life is the standard of value because it is the entire reason behind why we act. It's why we have ethics to begin with. It's why we act. And then the question arises in this: why do we choose life instead of death? Why is life this objective good? Or why is life this beginning of the standard of value? Why is life something that is the beginning of good? Well, because in life there is the potential for happiness. This is the reason why we continue to live. This is the reason why we choose life instead of death. Happiness is necessarily good. It's necessarily a good feeling. You can't say, "Oh, I wouldn't be happy if I were happy." That doesn't make sense. You will be happy if you're happy, and the potential for happiness is within life. So you live. You decide with this fundamental alternative. You decide that, "Oh, I'm going to choose to live because there's this potential for happiness within life that I'm going to pursue." So the whole reason that you act is to live, and basically the whole reason you act to gain and keep values is fundamentally to live, because that is the primary reason for action. Because the reason for action, well, when you question why do I act in general, you see that you're faced with this alternative of life or death, and if you don't act, you die, and if you act for life-sustaining values, you live. So, I mean, that's the purpose of action, and the purpose of deciding, and the purpose of living, the purpose why you want to live, is to be happy. So this means essentially that you want to be, your life is essentially in the context of happiness. You want to live in the context of happiness. That's the purpose of living, and this is a sort of unique conception of happiness that kind of distinguishes it from just pure survival and drifting on its own. Because if you're not living for the potential of happiness, you're not really living in the objectivist conception, because the whole reason why you choose to live to begin with is because of this potential for happiness. And then only and basically how you sustain your life, the way that individuals survive is through the use of reason. This is basically how we look at reality, form concepts, and decide what to do about these concepts in reality, what to do about reality, what actions to take to sustain our life, which is, of course, as I've already said, the primary purpose of action. So you basically use your rational faculty, use your conceptual mind to survive, and this is only an individual faculty. Only an individual can think for himself, can think about what aspects of reality are meaningful or are important for him to pursue, important for his life, because essentially everyone has different requirements for life. Of course, there's the same sort of human nature. This is why we can philosophize about ethics at all and come up with virtues, duty, human nature. But it's similar to a diet, for example. If you every single human being has this general standard for diet, certain things we need, but each individual person has some different requirements for diet that they need to discover for themselves. This is why there's little differences between human beings that are still objective. They're still objectively true. There's still an objective sort of diet that we need to pursue. just as there's objective values that we need to pursue to sustain our lives. But they're different for each person. They're come to by the individual faculty of reason. You can't force this on anyone either. You cannot force a person to be happy, because this is fundamentally the context that we need to live into, or that we need to be in to live, essentially. You can't force life onto somebody because that contradicts their experience of happiness. Because this is largely because when you force a positive action on somebody, which you can't do, but I'll have to explain that. When you force a positive action on somebody, or an action that's going to lead to their life or lead to their happiness, this action was forced upon them. It was not something that they came to through their own conscious means, through their own volition. They didn't come to making this decision on their own, and this means that all the negative aspects of this decision, which there are usually some negative aspects, they never put it in the context of this broader reason of why I want to do this thing. So let's say, for example, someone was like forced to go to college and get a degree. And let's say this is the best thing for them too. But they never consciously came to this decision. Well, then they are forced into this college degree, and they are forced to do all this work, all this, or like leaving their hometown behind, leaving their friends behind. Let's say they're forced to go out of state because that's what we decide is the best thing for them. They're forced to do all these sort of things that they view as negative, without ever consciously coming to this broader context of why it ultimately is in their best interest and ultimately why it makes them happy. You need to come to these. Principles of what makes you happy on your own, through your own volition. It cannot be forced upon you. This reason is an individual faculty, and if someone else reasons for you, you can never be happy because of what I've outlined. So essentially, an individual needs to act for himself and think for himself to fulfill the purpose of life, which is happiness, and to ultimately live an ethical life. Any altruistic pursuit fundamentally contradicts all of this. Any pursuit not for your life, where you sacrifice your life for like some other things, for the group, for example, you're fundamentally contradicting your entire purpose for acting in general, which is your life in the context of your happiness. And yeah, this is a fundamental contradiction. Therefore, consequently, selfishness is a virtue. One should pursue their own happiness, pursue their own life using their own mind. Selfishness is a virtue. And yeah, I think that is all I have to say for today. Selfishness is a virtue. Go be selfish, everybody. Think about your happiness first. Please, we need a world where people are more concerned for their self-interest. That is something that I think would be a lot more in my self-interest, and it would be in your self-interest as well. So, selfishness is a virtue. Go read The Virtue of Selfishness by Ayn Rand. Her essay, The Objectivist Ethics, outlines all of the stuff that I've kind of been talking about in probably a better way, I would assume, because she understands her philosophy better than I understand her philosophy, probably. But yeah, go read The Objectivist Ethics. Go read Atlas Shrugged. Go read The Fountainhead, and be selfish, everybody. And thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next video. Peace.